My name is Stephanie Grader. I am the HMIS team lead, and the team will go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm an HMIS specialist, and for me, I think I would choose to be all alone. But I do think if anyone else chooses to be surrounded by annoying people, I do think I will be a part of your group. So apologies in advance.
Everyone, Brandy here. I would choose to be surrounded by annoying people. Might be maybe a little relatable having children, but I prefer interaction of any kind, aside from being alone, or instead of being alone.
Yeah, I think somebody has background noise.
Hi, Frankie. I would choose to be alone. I spent 14 years locked up with some really annoying people, so I'm good with being alone.
Hey everyone, it's Laura, program specialist. And I would definitely be surrounded by annoying people. I have good practice with that. I got a really annoying family members. Um, and you gotta love them despite their quirks and all that. So that would be my choice.
And I am Sam, and I would also go with surrounded by annoying people and mirror Brandy's answer. I do have three little ones, although they're becoming less little over time, and they bring me so much joy, and also sometimes they raise my blood pressure like crazy. So maybe when they're all out of the house and in college, I'll switch to alone, but right now it is sort of a pleasure. And it looks like most people would say alone. So, and that makes sense to me too.
Yeah. Like kind of people. Yay. All right.
Hi. So our agenda is going to be going over our webinar reminders and any announcements that are new this week. Training for prior living situations. We're going to go into a deep dive on that. And we're also going to train on the LMS Balance of State and Maricopa platform so that we can help guide you a little better on how to do the online trainings. Next. Reminders are to make sure that you share this information with the appropriate staff members, anybody in your agency that this would be relevant to. Ask questions in the Q&A function, not in the chat, if you would please. Attendance is collected by a survey that's completed at the end of the session. It's also going to be on the webinar once we send it out, which is going to be Monday, August 3rd. The deadline to complete the video and the quizzes are going to be on Friday, August 7th. Sam?
And so just a couple quick updates. So nothing too in-depth here. So the biennial DQ check, we did send it out a couple of weeks ago. We had a technical issue, so we appreciate the patience of everybody who was able to wait for that. There's a dashboard for both Balance of State as well as Maricopa County, and this was the quickest viewed dashboard we've ever had with the most number of views in the shortest amount of time. So we hope that is a good sign. We are planning just to refresh it in a couple of weeks and to see what the difference is, and we can even share that difference and that change at the end of August in the August AAW. The other part is the vendor transition. So we are currently just finalizing trainings with the vendor and finalizing the workflows on our side. We have a lot of details about what training will look like in late August and September. And we will also be looking for some users to start early just to give feedback on the trainings and or the workflows. But right now we are just processing a whole ton of information, learning a lot. And right now, the current step, the major milestone is that WellSky is providing Green River a full database copy so that Green River can start exporting or importing that information and really mapping all the data elements we have in WellSky or community services to the OpenPath software. We have seen a lot of information about user setups. We're pretty excited about the user setups. There's a lot more granularity, and auditing should be a lot easier and a lot more convenient across the board. That definitely has been a frustration we've heard over a long time. But I think with this change, we will be able to solve most, if not all, the problems and frustrations people have with auditing accounts. But at the end of August, we'll have very specific information on training, and that training will also be on the LMSs, and we'll be covering some information with LMSs a little bit later. If you have any questions specific to vendor transition or the Binote DQ check, please throw it in the Q&A portion, and we can touch on those.
Okay, so we're gonna go into the prior living situation data element deep dive. This right here, the purpose, the data collection, and the project type, we kind of went over this in our last AAW, so it's a little bit of a refresher. But again, the purpose is to identify the type of living situation and length of stay. So living situation and length of stay in that type of situation immediately prior to project start. So where was that person? Where did they sleep last night prior to coming into your project? And then also to identify whether a client appears to meet the criteria of experiencing chronic homelessness when combined with other data elements. So, for example, disabling condition would be one of those other data elements that is used to determine whether a client is experiencing chronic homelessness. And then the other purpose is to demonstrate eligibility for reporting purposes. And then again, the data is collected about all adults and heads of households. And then the project type applies to, well, there's two different, it's split into two. So we have 3.917A, and that's applicable to the emergency shelter, street outreach, and safe haven project types. And then 3.17B is applicable to all other HMIS project types. And then we'll go into those two project types, or those two data elements a bit further here. So for 3.917A, that consists of 5 questions that you're going to be asking the client. And again, that's to get at the type of situation they're in and the length of stay in that situation. So the first question is the prior living situation. Again, where did the client sleep last night, right before they came into your project? The second question is the length of stay in that situation. So again, how long was that client staying in that place? And then number 3, the approximate date this episode of homelessness started. So again, what is the approximate date that this episode of homelessness started? And then number 4, regardless of where they stayed last night, the number of times the client has been on the streets, in emergency shelter, or safe haven in the past 3 years. So again, how many times has that client been in those types of situations? And then number 5, the last question, the total number of months homeless on the street, in emergency shelter, or safe haven in the past 3 years. So those are the 5 questions that encompass 3.917A. And then for 3.917B, this question has conditional logic. So the homeless history fields are collected only when required. And then that's including for persons entering from an institution where they stay less than 90 days and were homeless immediately prior to entering the institution. And then for persons entering from living situations where they resided less than 7 days and were homeless immediately prior. And we're going to go into some examples after these slides so we can kind of get an idea of what that might look like. And so for 3.917B, again, it does have the conditional logic. So you will go through the first three questions of where was the client just before the project start, how long was the client staying in that place, and then if they were staying in an institution, or was the stay in an institution less than 90 days, or the stay in the permanent or transitional housing was that less than 7 days? If yes, then you would go on to the follow-up question asking on the night before that, were they on the streets in emergency shelter or safe haven? And again, if the answer is no, you would stop. But then if it's yes, then you go into those questions about the approximate date homelessness started, how many times were they on the streets or safe haven or emergency shelter in the last 3 years, and then that the last question, how many months has the client been on the streets in emergency shelter safe haven in the past 3 years? Before we get into the client examples, just wanted to go over the categories of prior living situation. So there are categories and there are types. So these are the categories. So it's a homeless situation, an institutional situation, temporary housing situation, permanent housing situation, or other. So those are the categories of the prior living situation. And so so situation and length of time. So for the prior living situation, the responses are intended to reflect the client's last living situation immediately prior to start date. And so, let's see. And then also, so the situation and the length of time come together. Sorry. The length of time the client was residing in the living situation, if the client moved around but was in the same type of situation, include the total time in that type of situation. So for example, a client goes from their vehicle to an encampment. Both of these situations are considered a place not meant for habitation. And the total length of time the client was in both of these situations would be considered to accurately calculate the length of stay in prior living situation. And then another example, if a client went from an emergency shelter to an encampment and then back to the emergency shelter, these situations are considered a homeless situation. And the total length of time the client went back and forth between shelter and the encampment would be considered to accurately calculate the length of stay in the prior living situation. And so this example here shows the importance of like gathering all that information about the client's prior living situation, because this example shows like if we didn't get all that information, then the client wouldn't necessarily in the system qualify as chronically homeless. So the example we have here, let's see. So the example we have here is a client who stayed in oh, this is an example, sorry, for 3.917B. And then the data collection is at a permanent housing project. So the client was in a shelter for 15 days, then was in jail for 20 days, left there to a detox for 3 days, and then they're at the permanent housing project or enrollment now. So this example is showing if the institutional stays weren't considered the same type of situation, that I'm sorry, if these were considered two separate situations, the detox and the jail, then here in this middle column, it shows that sequence of questions. So if we say that the client, right before coming into the permanent housing project, they were in detox, if we only consider that one situation, that would be their prior living situation. And then we say the length of stay is 2 to 6 nights. And then and then we say, were they in the institution less than 90 days? We say yes, because in our example, they were only there for 3 days. And then if we say that prior to that, they weren't in an emergency shelter, we say that they were staying in the jail less than 90 days, then we don't get those follow-up questions to determine, whether or not they may have qualified for chronically homeless. But then this last column, because these are considered the same situations, the jail stay and the detox, we say that their prior living situation was the substance abuse treatment facility or detox center. And again, since we're combining these situations as the same, they were actually in that type of situation for a week, but less than a month. And then we say that they were in, their stay was less than 90 days in the jail. And then, but when we come down here to were they living in an emergency shelter or safe haven or on the streets prior, and we say yes, because before they went to jail, they were in the shelter for 15 days, then we're able to collect the information about when their homelessness started, how many times were they homeless, and then how many months within those 12 months. And so if you see here in this example, this client actually may qualify for being chronically homeless. So again, you going into the timeline with your client, working backwards, or however you all have found to be the most effective way to get that information from clients, an accurate reflection of the situation of their prior living situation and the length of time in those situations. It really counts towards the client, giving an accurate account of the client's homelessness. And again, they could qualify for programs or being chronically homeless if those questions are really kind of hashed out and the timelines and everything are accounted for accurately. And then the last part we were talking as far as the purpose of 3.917, one of those was to determine eligibility. So for Q15 living situation on the COC program APR, that is used to identify the living situation of persons at project start. Also, an explanation must be provided in SAGE for anyone entering a COC program for a non-homeless situation in the program eligibility form. Also, HUD reviews this information as part of the APR review process. And then I'll just pause here for questions about anything, prior living situations, calculating that. Any questions? Yes. So Stephanie Duncan asked, just to make sure I understand. Oh, the question went away.
I'll read it, Stephanie, so someone else can
Okay.
answer it. But just to make sure I understand, there have been no changes in how we are counting time, correct? This is just a review of what has been going on.
Yes, this is just to review everybody, just so we can stay fresh on our data elements, and up to date. Nothing has changed. Don't see any other questions. We will have time for questions at the end, just in general. So we'll go ahead and move on to Ali and Laura.
So we're just going to be going over the different LMS platforms. So I'm going to go over the Maricopa one, and then Laura will go over the Balance of State one. So we're just kind of doing like a little bit more of an in-depth showcase of these, just because as of right now, training sessions will be paused until the vendor transition is completed. So all new users will have to go through the LMS platform to complete training. And Maricopa will be the first to transition into the new system, and then we'll move to the balance of state system. So, yeah, so we just want to kind of give you all a little overview of them. And so when you are registering for the LMS platform, we do ask that you use your work email, your full first and last name, and the agency you were with. Once the trainings are completed, we will have the user download the certificates and send those to the AA to have the agency admin complete the new user packet and then submit that ticket. And then just a little just so you have it. So what you're going to do is you're going to log in. You're going to be at the home page, go to the HMIS training tab, click on the HMIS intro training. Especially if you don't know which training project type you need to do, always start with the HMIS training. And then I will just kind of show you all. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So when you go onto the Maricopa LMS platform, you are just going to go log in. If you do not already have an account, you will just create an account. It'll ask for your name, your full name, your email, and a password. Once you have once you have your login information, you will just go ahead and log in. You'll come to this home page. You will see these tabs up here that mine say my trainings, paths, certificates, and HMIS trainings, calendars, and events. You are going to go into the HMIS trainings tab. Once you are here, you're going to see all of the HMIS training project types that we have. Like I said, if you don't know which one to do, you can always start with the intro. But the intro training is always integrated into all of these trainings. So if you start with case management, you will have to do that intro training, and then do the other sections. If you've already completed the intro training, prior to coming to the one like case management, you won't have to do this section. You will just have to do these additional sections of that training. So once you finish a training, it will pop up with the certificate to download. If you don't download it right away, you can just click on that training and you can just click view certification. Oh my gosh, the word certificate doesn't even sound like a word anymore. So you can click on that to view your certificate and download it with the download button right here. I know it's a little bit, it's very tiny, but the download button is just right there. If you don't remember how to get that, you can always just go to certificates right here and just scroll down to the training, and it just brings you right back to the certificate right there. And that is the Maricopa LMS platform. If anybody has any questions about that, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and then I think we'll move on to Laura.
Alrighty, so there are a little bit of some differences in the balance of state learning management system. So balance of state does take a few days, a couple days, the most for your registration to fully process. That is because Kyle Kearns, he has to go in and manually approve everyone's registration, and he's the only one doing it. So um, just, there will be a registration link that's on the new user packet. Um, and yeah, just expect to get something back from them. But if it has been more than a couple days, then you can reach out to Kyle Kearns here, have his email listed here, and he will be able to help you with that. And then just another note that users should download their certificate and send their certificate to their agency admins as soon as they're done. But they are able to go back in at a later time and download that if needed. And then the training path for balance of state is a little bit different. So we would be on the homepage, go to course catalog. We're going to click on balance of state HMIS training under categories, and then choose your project type. And then again, if you don't know which program type that you're supposed to be completing training for, you can always just do the HMIS introductory training. And then just a reminder, since everyone will be required to do online training and submit a new user or submit the certificate with the new user packet, that only agency administrators can submit new user tickets, and two things must be attached to this new user ticket. So it's going to have to be the new user packet and the user's training certificate. So if that is not attached, then we'll just have to pause until we get that from you guys. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So I was going to go ahead and log in here to the balance of state LMS. So again, from here, from the homepage, we'll go to course catalog. From here, under categories, there's a list of different training types, but we want this balance of state HMIS training. So we'll click on that. And then all the HMIS trainings will pop up here. So again, depending on what type of project you're entering data into, you'll do that specific training type. However, if you don't know, then the HMIS introductory training will be here. And then you would just start your course, get through all the lessons, and then at the end, your certificate will pop up. And again, if you forget to download your certificate after the user has completed training, once it is completed, you're always able to go back in, go to course, click on go to course. And after you click course completed, your certificate should be able to download here. So getting your certificate is always available, but this is the path to submit a new user ticket moving forward until we transition. Any questions so far?
We did have a question. It says, can you please clarify under BOS, will all current users need a new user packet for the new system after they take the training?
That is a great question. TBD, most likely not. That would be a hassle for a lot of agencies, especially larger agencies, and if these are current. So we will come with a process to do that. We do have a lot of turnover throughout the year. Even when we do annual refresher trainings, 50, 60 users in the span of 6 weeks will no longer be working for the organization. So we'll have some sort of verification, but the new user packet would be cumbersome, we recognize, and so we'll probably use a different approach for existing users.
They were just asking what website we were on. We were just on the Balance of State Learning Management System site. But before that, we were in the Maricopa Learning Management System.
Yeah, so I just sent a link for the dashboard here that I was on in Balance of State. But that would only be available after you complete registration, and the registration link will be on the new user packet.
And so we'll pause here still just for generally any other questions about anything we have covered. Okay, so Kim is asking, will there be a testing site for the new system before it goes live?
Yes, the new vendor does include a testing site. They call it a staging site. So you may see that verbiage, but staging / testing training is all the same. So that will be available. Couple of more questions, Stephanie, looks like coming through here. So there is one in the chat.
Okay, so will we be able to see what the new platform looks like?
Yes, we will have that available. We've just gotten access. We haven't configured it entirely, but we can definitely go through a thorough demo in August. Absolutely. And maybe we can make some pre-videos ahead of that time as well. Let's see here. And there was one in the chat that I saw, which was, the question in the chat was, when is the start date for training? We are looking at the beginning of September. So in our experience, if you train, 8 weeks ahead of time on a new software, usually it doesn't go well and you have to retake it anyways. So we'll have those specific dates on the August AATW or AAW, but it will be the early September range for Maricopa users. For Balance of State users, you won't be transitioning to OpenPath until late November, early December. And so they likely wouldn't be available on the LMS for Balance of State until November, but we're going to use the same content for Maricopa and Balance of State. So I wouldn't be opposed to adding that to the Balance of State LMS earlier, if that is something the community does want.
I don't see any more, but we'll stay a bit longer if anybody does have any other questions. But to everyone else, again, thank you for joining us today. Go ahead and complete the survey once you leave the meeting. And again, thank you. There is one more question. It says, since I have a login for both Maricopa and BOS, will I do the training for both?
You would not. It's going to be a shared database, so the training would be applicable for access to the system, and that covers will cover the entire state. And so it's interesting because there's 3 COCs going to share the same database. There's going to be Balance of State, Maricopa County, as well as Pima. Balance of State and Maricopa County will have identical in the same training, since the system would be configured the same and will be shared. And so that will be a standard training across both those COCs. Pima County is managed by another HMIS lead. And so I know currently they tend to do in-person trainings. So what their offering looks like when they onboard in January, if you are also part of the Pima County COC, is unknown to us. We will happily go ahead and share our content, and we're more than happy to sort of pool our resources, and that's one of the benefits of a shared system. But ultimately, it will be up to Pima, that HMIS lead, on how they want to require training.
Again, thank you all for coming. Complete your survey on the exit and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.